I never planned to cheat on my husband. In fact, I spent years trying to fix what was already broken. Ethan and I had the kind of marriage people called stable. But stability isn't the same as love. Sometimes, silence can be louder than screaming, and ours had become deafening. It started the day I walked into Travis Correctional Facility. I was there to teach literature, not to fall in love. I remember the sound of steel doors closing behind me, the cold echo of footsteps on concrete floors, and then I saw him. Noah Carter. Prisoner 47,102. He looked up from a book of Mice and Men. His eyes met mine, and for a second, I forgot where I was. There was something in them, not danger, but sadness. The kind of sadness that mirrors your own. I didn't know that moment would change everything. That it would lead to letters hidden in textbooks, secret smiles across glass walls, and a kind of love that felt both forbidden and inevitable. If I could turn back time, maybe I would have walked away. But I didn't. Because for the first time in years, someone saw me. And that was the beginning of my greatest sin and my deepest truth. Before I tell you the rest of this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to love? Someone who made you feel alive again even when the world said it was wrong? If you've ever felt trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty inside. If you've ever found comfort in the last place anyone expected. Then this story, my story, is for you. Because this isn't just about betrayal. It's about loneliness. About finding pieces of yourself in someone society says you shouldn't love. It's about choices, the kind that change everything. So, before we go deeper, I want you to do something for me. Speech balloon comment below and tell me. Have you ever met someone who reminded you what it means to feel again? Red heart # like this story if you believe love doesn't always follow the rules. Bell and make sure you subscribe or follow, because the next part of this story, the part where everything starts to fall apart, is where the truth begins. Because when you love a man who's behind bars, you don't just risk your heart. You risk your freedom, your reputation, and sometimes, your soul. Stay with me. You're about to see how one small choice, one heartbeat, can turn a woman's quiet life into a storm she never saw coming. My name is Claire Anderson. I'm 35 years old, a literature teacher at a small community college in Austin, Texas. For most of my life, I've been the woman who followed the rules, the good daughter, the faithful wife, the one who always stayed calm even when she was breaking inside. My husband, Ethan, is a police officer. He's disciplined, predictable, and proud of the order he brings into the world. When we got married 10 years ago, I thought his steadiness would keep me safe. But after years of quiet dinners, empty smiles, and nights spent in silence, I realized I was living with a man who didn't see me anymore, only the version of me he wanted to control. When the community outreach program began, teaching literature to inmates, Ethan didn't approve. "Those men don't deserve your time," he said. But something inside me needed to go. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the need to feel something real again. The Travis Correctional Facility was a gray, concrete maze surrounded by barbed wire and tired souls. The air smelled like metal and bleach. But inside those walls, I found stories, real, raw, unfiltered stories written in trembling hands on torn notebook paper. That's where I first heard the name Noah Carter. Noah wasn't like the others. He was 29, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who carried his pain like a secret. He was serving time for vehicular manslaughter, something he never spoke about unless asked. But there was something in his eyes, not anger, not arrogance, but guilt. The kind of guilt that eats you slowly, day after day. Before him, my life was routine, predictable, safe, empty. But after that first class, everything changed. I didn't know it yet, but the line between duty and desire was already beginning to blur. And once that line disappeared, there was no going back. The first time I saw Noah Carter, it wasn't dramatic, no thunder, no music, just a quiet, strange stillness that felt like the world was holding its breath. He sat in the back of the classroom, apart from the others. His wrists were cuffed, though loosely, as if the guards already knew he wasn't trouble. His eyes were fixed on a page of Mice and Men. I remember thinking how odd it was, a man behind bars, lost in a story about freedom. When I introduced myself, most of the inmates nodded or smirked, but Noah didn't even look up. It wasn't disrespect, it was distance. A wall he'd built to keep people out. "Mr. Carter," I said gently, "what do you think Steinbeck meant when he wrote that dreams make people go crazy when they can't have them?" He looked up slowly. His voice was low, rough. "Maybe he meant some people are better off not dreaming at all." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. Not because of the words, but because it sounded like he believed them. The rest of the class went on, but my mind stayed with that sentence. Afterward, when everyone left, I gathered the papers and found his. On the back, he had written, "Dreams don't die. They just get locked up with the person who had them." I don't know why, but I kept that note. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing little things, how he'd help others spell words, how he listened when no one else did. He never flirted, never crossed a line. He was quiet, respectful, careful, but his silence said more than words ever could. Then one day, during class, he asked me a question. "Do you ever feel trapped, Mrs. Anderson?" It caught me off guard. I smiled politely and said, "Everyone feels that way sometimes." But he looked at me for a long moment and said softly, "No. I mean really trapped. Like you're living a life that doesn't feel like yours anymore." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what he'd said, how he somehow saw what I'd never said aloud. The next morning, I found myself looking forward to class. Not because I loved teaching, but because he'd be there. That's how it started, not with touch, not with lies, but with two people who saw each other too clearly in a world that had stopped seeing them at all. It began with letters. Not love letters, not at first, just reflections. Thoughts exchanged between teacher and student. But words have power. And sometimes, words cross lines hearts shouldn't. Noah started leaving short notes on the back of his essays. Quotes from books, questions about life, quiet fragments that sounded like confessions. One read, "Do you think people can be forgiven even when they can't forgive themselves?" I should have ignored it. I should have stayed professional. But loneliness makes poor choices look like lifelines. So I wrote back. Week after week, our exchanges grew deeper. He told me about his mother, how she used to sing to him through their broken walls. I told him about my marriage, about how silence had replaced love. Soon, those words became the only thing I looked forward to. Inside that cold, grey classroom, he made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way Ethan never did. When I spoke, Noah listened like every word mattered. When I smiled, he noticed. And when I cried once, quietly, during an exercise on loss, he just looked at me with eyes that said I understand. Then came the day that changed everything. Class had ended. The guards were late. For a few stolen minutes, it was just us. He sat at the desk, sketching something. When I walked closer, I saw it was a portrait of me. My face, soft, smiling, alive. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "It's how I see you." My heart stuttered. "Why would you draw me?" He shrugged. "Because you look like someone who forgot how beautiful she is." The air shifted. I felt tears rise, and then his hand, just for a second, brushed mine. That single touch, burned and healed at once. From that day, something unspoken connected us. I started wearing perfume again, something I hadn't done in years. He started reading love poems aloud in class, his voice lingering on every word that meant too much. The day I found his next note, I didn't even pretend to resist. It said, "If freedom had a face, it would look like you." I pressed that paper to my chest and whispered, "What are we doing?" I knew it was wrong, the late-night thoughts, the racing heart, the stolen letters, but the truth is, I felt alive. And after years of feeling invisible, alive was worth the risk. That night, when I got home, Ethan asked if I was seeing someone. I lied. But in my heart, I already knew the answer. I wasn't just teaching a prisoner anymore. I was falling in love with one. Love, when it's wrong, always demands a price. And mine was coming due. For months, I'd been living two lives. In one, I was Claire Anderson, the dutiful wife, the calm teacher, the woman who smiled at church and cooked dinner at 6. In the other, I was someone else entirely, a woman who laughed again, who felt again, who counted the hours until she could see Noah Carter. But secrets have a way of slipping through cracks. And Ethan was a man who noticed everything except my sadness, until it wasn't just sadness anymore. It started with a phone call. The prison administration had called our house by mistake, confirming a volunteer schedule. Ethan picked up. "Why is the prison calling you, Claire?" His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp, the kind that searched for lies. "I told you," I said quickly, "I'm helping with literacy classes." He nodded, slowly. But the silence that followed said he didn't believe me. Then one evening, he came home early. I was sitting on the couch, holding one of Noah's letters, words I read every night just to feel close to him. Before I could hide it, Ethan spoke. "Who's Noah?" The room went cold. I stammered, "He's just one of my students." "Your student wrote you this?" Ethan grabbed the paper, scanning the lines that said things like "You're my reason to try again." "Jesus, Claire. Do you hear yourself?" His voice cracked with anger and disbelief. "He's a criminal. You're my wife." I tried to speak, to explain that it wasn't like that, but maybe it was. Maybe I was lying to both of us. The next day, I was called into the prison office. The warden's tone was professional but icy. "Mrs. Anderson, it's come to our attention that you've had personal correspondence with inmate Carter. That's a breach of policy." My stomach twisted. How did you know?" "Letters are screened. You know that." I felt my world tilt. I was suspended immediately. No classes. No visits. No contact. When I left the facility that day, the last thing I saw was Noah standing behind the glass, confusion and panic in his eyes. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. I wanted to tell him I'd come back. But I couldn't. That night, Ethan didn't speak to me. The silence was worse than shouting. I lay in bed, eyes open, replaying every word Noah had written. And then it hit me. I hadn't just risked my job or my marriage. I'd risked the only real connection I'd felt in years. And for what? To love a man I could never truly have. Weeks passed after the suspension, and every day felt like I was holding my breath. No calls. No letters. No classes. Just silence, heavy, punishing silence. Ethan thought he'd won. He went back to talking about moving on, pretending the storm had passed. But inside me, something had already shifted, something that couldn't return to the woman I was before Noah Carter. Then one afternoon, I received a small brown envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded sketch, my face again, this time with tears drawn down my cheeks. Beneath it, one sentence. "Freedom doesn't mean anything if you're living in a cage you built yourself." My heart broke all over again. I knew I shouldn't go back. I knew the risks. But love, real, desperate love, doesn't care about consequences. So, I drove back to the prison. The guard recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Anderson, you're not cleared for visits." "I just need 5 minutes," I whispered. "Not possible." But fate has strange timing. A few days later, I got a call from the warden. "There's been an incident," he said. "Inmate Carter saved another man during a fire. He's in the infirmary. He asked for you." I froze. My heart pounded so loud I could barely breathe. When I arrived, they led me to the medical unit. He was there, bruised, bandaged, but alive. The moment he saw me, his eyes softened like the world had finally returned to color. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. "I couldn't stay away," I said, tears blurring my vision. He smiled faintly. "They'll transfer me soon. Different facility. Won't see you again." My throat tightened. "Noah, He shook his head gently. "Don't say it. Just remember me like this. Not as a number. Not as a mistake." But I couldn't hold it in anymore. "I love you," I said. The words broke out of me like a confession. He closed his eyes, pained. "Then promise me something. Don't waste your life waiting for a man behind bars. Live, Claire. Be free." The guard cleared his throat, signaling time was up. I wanted to scream, to fight, to stay. But all I could do was touch his hand one last time, feeling his warmth fade under mine. As they led me out, I looked back. Noah raised his hand in a small wave. And for the first time since I met him, he smiled. That was the last time I ever saw him. 2 months after that visit, a letter came. Stamped Texas Department of Corrections. My hands trembled before I even opened it. Inside, a short note, not from Noah, but from another inmate. He wanted you to have this. He said you'd understand. Folded inside was a page torn from a notebook. Noah's handwriting, small, neat, familiar. Claire. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Don't cry. I made peace with my past long before I met you. You were never my mistake. You were my reminder that I was still human. I told you not to wait for me, but I know you. So promise me, live. Love again. Find the life I can only dream of. N. I didn't move for hours. The words blurred through my tears. Gone. The man who made me feel alive again, gone. They said it was a heart attack, caused by the smoke from the fire. He died quietly in his sleep, just days before his transfer. For a long time, I couldn't step into a classroom again. I couldn't look at a book without seeing him, that quiet boyish smile, that steady gaze. Ethan and I tried to rebuild, but you can't rebuild a house after the foundation's cracked. One night, I packed a small bag and left. No shouting. No final goodbye. Just a note. We both deserve to breathe again. I moved to Santa Fe, far from the noise, far from the life that felt like a lie. I started teaching at a small community center, not for credit, not for money, just for the joy of helping people find their words again. One afternoon, while sorting through donated books, I found an old copy of Mice and Men. Inside the cover, written in faint pencil, were 5 words that made me freeze. Dreams don't die with us. Noah's words. The same ones he once wrote to me on that first essay. I sat down right there on the floor and smiled through the tears. Because maybe, just maybe, he wasn't really gone. Maybe love, the real kind, doesn't need walls, or promises, or forever. It just needs to have existed, even for a moment. And in that moment, sitting alone with a book and a ghost of a love that changed me, I finally did what he asked me to do. I lived. When I look back now, I don't see my story as one of betrayal, I see it as one of awakening. Noah didn't come into my life to destroy it. He came to remind me that love isn't always about perfection or permanence. Sometimes, it's about truth, raw, inconvenient, undeniable truth. I used to believe that love was supposed to fit inside rules, vows, and promises. But now I know love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for the right time. It simply arrives unexpected, messy, impossible, and leaves you forever changed. What I had with Noah wasn't about infidelity or rebellion. It was about feeling alive again after years of silence. It was about remembering that hearts can still beat even behind bars, and that sometimes the person who saves you is the one everyone else has already condemned. He taught me that freedom isn't about where you live, it's about how you live. And love, no matter how brief, can be the kind of freedom that sets you free from yourself. So if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You can't control who touches your soul. You can only choose what you do with that touch, whether to hide from it or let it teach you what love truly means. And me. I chose to remember him not as the man I wasn't supposed to love, but as the reason I learned how to love again, even myself. If you've listened this far, thank you. Because maybe this story isn't just mine. Maybe it's for anyone who's ever felt unseen, unloved, or trapped in a life that stopped feeling like theirs. Tell me, have you ever met someone who woke something inside you thought was gone? Someone who made you question everything, even yourself? Speech balloon comment below and tell me your thoughts. What would you have done if you were me? Red heart #like this story if you believe love can be found in the most unexpected places. Bell and subscribe or follow for more stories like this, true, raw, and painfully human. Because in the end, love doesn't always come wrapped in perfection. Sometimes, it comes in broken letters, quiet eyes, and choices that don't make sense to anyone else. But if it changes you, if it reminds you you're still alive, then maybe, just maybe, it was worth it.